Hello and welcome to the One City Rising and Little Africa News Manhattan Candidates Forum. My name is Mona Davids, and I am the founder of Little Africa News, New York Voice News, and the podcast Real Talk with Mona Davids. I am co-hosting with the wonderful Maria Denzillo from One City Rising. And this is just another part in a series of candidate forums that we are jointly co-hosting. Today's candidates that we're interviewing are Keith Powers and Brad Hoylman-Sigal. And we're going to start first with Maria giving her opening remarks, and then opening remarks and introductions from Councilman Keith Powers. Maria?
Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining, and thank you, Councilmember Powers. We will be joined shortly by Senator Hoylman-Sigal as well. Just wanted to thank our diverse community partners. We're here tonight because we all love New York City and Manhattan, and whether we live, work, or visit, this island is very special to all of us. So I just want to thank our community partners, African Institute for Leadership and Empowerment, the Asian Wave Alliance, Small Property Owners of New York, SUNY Africa Radio, Place NYC, African Leaders Coalition, the E-Vehicle Safety Alliance, the African Journal, New York Voice News, Families for New York, the Washington Place Block Association, the Neighborhood Action Group, Washington Place Block Association, the Coalition for Ethnic and Community Media, the Alliance for Community Preservation and Betterment, the South Asian Fund for Education and Scholarship Training, Vocal Village Voices, NYC School Safety Coalition, New York City Residents Alliance, the East Harlem Neighborhood Group, the West Side Community Organization, and the West 83rd Street Community Group. So it's a pretty big group, and hopefully everybody will get their questions answered tonight. We've been collecting questions for the last couple days from our community partners, so we're looking forward to a very good forum. Okay.
So, Councilman Powers, please introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself, some of the legislation that you passed, and if elected Manhattan Borough President, what are you going to be doing to improve the lives of all residents?
Thank you. Thank you, Maria and Mona. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm City Council Member Keith Powers, running for Manhattan Borough President. And I think, as Maria said, we all love this place. We believe in it, and we believe in making sure that we secure its future. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, born and raised here on the east side of Manhattan. And I'm running for Borough President because I think we're in a crisis here in the city that needs bold leadership to step up and to fix it, and big ideas for how we get through these various crises right now. Whether it is a housing crisis that continues to leave so many people feeling like the city is unaffordable, a homelessness crisis where we still have so much work to do to tackle homelessness and address it on our streets, our subways, and our shelters, a public safety crisis that's taking place, frankly, because I think we still have laws that need to be fixed. We need common sense put back into our public safety system, and a crisis of leadership in our city, in our borough, where people feel like and our federal government, of course, too, where people feel deeply like we need leaders who are just going to step up, roll up their sleeves, and get to work and tackle all these different crises with new ideas. In my election, I'm proud to be supported by Congress members like Richie Torres, like Carol Maloney, Adriano Espaillat, and more, to be supported by many of the labor unions here in the city, including our firefighters, many of our units representing the police, all of them representing the police officers here, sanitation workers, you name it, people that are putting the uniforms on every day to help get to work to make ourselves have a much better city. And I put out new ideas for how I think we can do that. That includes tackling quality of life issues with a new way to use the Borough President's Office to lean into issues in every neighborhood, to fix those quality of life issues, to boosting our headcount in our local neighborhood precincts, to tackle areas in this borough where we still need a lot of public safety help, to looking at how we add more housing throughout the entire borough. And also, frankly, to think big about how we use this office to not only change things in Albany that need to be fixed, but on the ground level here in the city as well. I say truthfully, there's 2 times in my life where I think New Yorkers have felt kind of nervous. That's my childhood in the 80s when people were feeling nervous about getting on the subway system, and today. And it's not a made up thing. It's the reality of the people I'm talking to every day when I knock doors or I call voters. They say we want somebody to do something about the issues that are making us feel less safe. And that's what we're focused on. And we also have obviously a tremendous role to play here in the education system to keep boosting good quality schools in our borough. Of course, the borough president plays a role in that as somebody who gets appointments and obviously oversees our neighborhoods here as well. So anyway, that's my about me. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about. I apologize because I do have to leave a little early to get to my next forum, but did want to be here with you guys, and I appreciate you putting together such a robust forum.
Thank you so much. Why don't we go into our first question then until Senator Hoylman-Sigal jumps on. In 2025, Oxford University Economics Global Cities Index ranked New York City as the #1 city in the world. That's a huge honor. We are the global hub for finance, tech, advertising, and media, and we have the largest metropolitan economy in the world. Yet many people who live here feel that Manhattan in particular has been spiraling downward for quite some time in terms of quality of life and livability. Moreover, we've seen the average annual income for New Yorkers has not kept pace with other cities. There's been a significant outward migration, including businesses as well as individuals moving to lower tax states like Florida and Texas. So if you're elected to Manhattan Borough President, what will you do to ensure New York retains its preeminent role as the #1 city in the world, and mostly focusing on what you will do to keep businesses and people here in New York City and keep our economy thriving and growing, attracting higher and better paying jobs, not just lowering housing costs, which we all know is a big problem?
Thank you for that. First of all, I appreciate this question because it is the first time I think in any forum I've had so far people actually asked about the economy and asked about job creation and economic development and growth, which I feel like as Democrats, I'm a Democrat at least. I know not maybe some aren't. As Democrats, we have stopped talking about the need to improve the economy here and grow jobs, and that is something that I think the Democratic Party needs to talk a lot more about, because it is how we pay for police, it's how we pay for fire, it's how we pay for so many things, is creating good, vibrant jobs. Look, the starting point on this is when, as a borough president, when you are talking about land use and zoning to help recruit and build and the next new version of spaces here, like I represent Midtown, our land use and zoning process has led to thousands of new jobs thousands of jobs being retained. Like we did the JP Morgan rezoning. There's many other businesses that are coming through looking for new places to land jobs. We cannot villainize those businesses, and we can't use the land use process to attack people who want to create jobs here in the city. So to me, that's a sort of starting point, a big part of it. We also have to address underlying conditions here that do make people ask that question about New York or somewhere else, and make sure that they feel safe when they are their employees are coming and going from work. And that work from home policies can be replaced with people in person, because we want to see, because we make them feel welcome and accommodating. And frankly, we have to look at the business environment entirely in New York City. We cannot continue to pile on policies that drive businesses out because it's just frankly a better proposition in other places. And the borough president can play a role in not only attracting new businesses by actually saying, we want you here, we want you to grow jobs here. How do we help make that happen? I think we should hear more of that from elected officials. But second is to address the business conditions, the safety conditions, and other policies that might make people hesitate going to and from work. And I just add on, like the subway system. That is our great equalizer in New York City. And if it's not safe for a lot of people when they're traveling to and from work, then we start to have problems.
Great. I see Senator Hoylman-Sigal has joined us. Shall we just take a moment to give him a chance to introduce himself?
Yes, but just give me a few seconds here, because I've been trying to add him to the stage, but I'm not being able to add him.
I see him. And thanks for that, Keith, on the question on the economy. I do agree with you that I've been to a lot of forums for different offices, and the economy question just isn't coming up. And I really agree with you that the Democrats need to talk about it much more.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Okay, let's just check. Senator, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I just want to make sure if Maria, can you see the senator on stage?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, okay,
We're good.
okay, fantastic. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We did get started because Councilmember Powers has a hard stop, so we wanted to just get going. We did the introductions. He gave his presentation, his opening statement, so you have 2 minutes for that. We're going to ask a series of questions. We're going to go back and forth, and we're just covering, basic issues that we've talked about many times, and you were all talking about in your literature, like housing, education, et cetera. So please, the stage is yours to make your presentation.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, Mona. Good to see you, Keith. We were at a forum this morning.
Yeah.
I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal. I'm running for Manhattan Borough President because I really think we need an effective champion in the borough presidency, as well as someone who will stand up to Trump and protect our borough from the excesses of the federal administration. Look, I've been doing that for over a decade in Albany, where I've passed over 370 bills on a range of issues. But these issues, as Keith knows, I say often, I see through the eyes of my two young daughters, age 7 and 14. And I think about, will they be able to afford the rent when they're adults? Do they feel safe on the subway? A question I ask myself every day when my daughter commutes from the village on the sea up to the Upper West Side. Will they have access to the tremendous public schools and cultural institutions and healthcare that women before them have had? And I've worked on those issues and more, including protecting our immigrant neighbors by passing the Protect Our Courts Act in Albany, by getting illegal guns, untraceable guns called ghost guns, off of our streets, by making certain that tenants were not evicted during COVID, and more. Public safety, which I know is a focus of this group, is top of mind, as it should for every New Yorker, and certainly
Uh-oh.
including making sure that people who sell goods illegally online are prosecuted, a bill that I passed cracking down on e-fencing in the last legislative session. I'm proud to have been endorsed by everyone, including people you might know, including New York State Attorney General Tish James, 3 former borough presidents, including Gail Brewer, C. Virginia Fields, and Ruth Messenger, as well as Congressman Jerry Nadler, Dan Goldman, and State Senators Cordell Clear, Robert Jackson, and Liz Kruger, who just endorsed me yesterday. So I've got a big team. We're fighting till the finish. I've got great colleagues supporting me, but do pay my respect to Keith and Calvin's son for running a spirited race. And we'll have more conversations as we head toward early voting on June 14th and the primary on June 24th.
Thank you. We'll go back to the first question we asked Keith later so that we can move on to the second question. So we'll give you a chance to respond to the economy question after.
Okay, I'm happy to do it now because I think that's a really important issue.
All right, go for it.
Yeah. I worked at an organization called the Partnership for New York City, which is a consortium of CEOs, and really got my understanding of what's important to employers and CEOs who may want to locate their headquarter operations in New York City. And what I learned, Maria and Mona, through that 12 years where I worked, is that it's about infrastructure. And infrastructure takes a lot of different components. Housing is definitely at the top. Will their employees be able to afford to live in Manhattan? That's like number one. Number two, Keith alluded to it. Will they have accessible mass transit. Very proud that we've been improving mass transit. We have a long way to go to make it accessible, particularly to people with disabilities. Are the public schools good? That's a big question that is often asked, and we need to answer affirmatively on that. And do we have arts and culture supported? Because let's face it, Maria, that's why young people, in many respects, want to move to the city, is because it is a great time to be a New Yorker, whether it's Broadway or the Knicks or nightlife. This is what makes New York special, and we have to protect it and defend it. And then quality of life. Do their employees feel safe? Are the taxes too high? And will we continue to support efforts to improve our public infrastructure, whether it's outdoor dining or making sure that e-bikes and other delivery riders act accordingly to keep our pedestrians safe? Those are all the big questions. So it's very pertinent. And thank you for asking it.
Okay, great. So we're going to go into the next question. It has to do with a very important topic of community board members. So one of your biggest responsibilities as borough president, and it's a big obligation to fill a lot of community board seats, and community boards are quite important. Senator Hoylman-Sigal, I studied everybody's campaign literature, and I see you've made a campaign promise to boot special interest real estate lobbyists from community boards, which we support. But please, both of you, talk about your philosophy on appointing community board members and the criteria you're going to use to elect members. Will you broadly allow lobbyists and other special interest groups like car and delivery apps to remain on community boards where they seem to have an outsized influence, as evidenced last night at a community board meeting where my phone was blowing up all day over it? So if you could just talk about your philosophy on community board appointments. Everybody really wants to hear that. It's probably the number one question for the two of you.
Sure.
Please go first.
Okay, sure. Thanks for that. Look, I was on a community board. I know the senator chaired a community board. We both have a lot of experience here dealing with them. And I have pledged, and I believe this is the best way forward, to make sure that we have merit-based appointments with community with term limits coming up on our community boards in the next few years, which I think some people know about, some people don't. It is going to be really important that I think we have just really a really good merit-based system, and I pledge to do a completely new, a sort of updated new independent screening panel process. Let's get good people from every community to come in, screen the candidates, talk to them about what their vision is for being on a community board. Let's make sure we have geographical diversity, obviously have diversity across the board on our boards. Make sure they're balanced and fair. I say this really honestly. You don't have to agree with me on everything. You still have a right to be my appointee on the community board to make sure we have a balanced set of voices on that, and to make sure that communities are really represented. So that's my first pledge, is making sure that when you talk about special interests or anything else, like, that is a way to make sure, to me, you can address that, so that community members can help with that panel process. We also have to, frankly, recruit a lot of people to go serve on them, since we have a big term limit question coming up. And so I want New Yorkers to feel like this is even a basic civic duty to do when you move to a neighborhood. Join your community board, even for a few years, and have input into the conversation about housing, about transit, about small businesses, because they are a way to make sure that your voice is heard in your community, and that we can address the deficits or the needs of it as well. So I think setting up a new independent merit-based process can solve for a lot of the issues and a lot of debates that are happening right now in our boards, where people feel like it's competing interests contesting against each other, and to maybe have a more balanced and honest conversation about what's necessary.
Thank you. Senator Hoylman-Sigal?
Yeah, I generally agree. I helped institute an independent screening panel for then Borough President Scott Stringer when I served on his transition committee. I served as a community board member for a decade and was chair for 3. And I know that the credibility of a community board is really dependent on the credibility of its constituent members. So if people are raising doubts about special interests or outside interests on a community board, that hurts the board's ability to effectively function, because their power is only advisory, but very, very powerful if the board is respected by elected officials, government officials, and other stakeholders. So I would draw a bright line at no lobbyists. I think that's the easiest way to do it. If look, there aren't any lobbyists in the New York State Senate. There shouldn't be any registered lobbyists on community boards. That's the way I see it. But I also feel like, in addition to having independent screening panel and preventing lobbyists from serving, we need the boards to reflect the diversity of our neighborhoods. So certainly, we want diverse backgrounds. We want both professionals and people without college degrees. We want moms and we want single folks. We want older people and we want younger people. And we want the neighborhoods to support their board members. And so when a young person looks at a community board and sees the membership, they should be able to see someone there who represents them. And we need to inspire young people to join. I got on a community board, Mona and Maria, because of a woman named Vicky Pullen, who literally pulled me off the street on 10th in the village and asked me to join the block association. From there, I joined the community board. From the community board, I joined my local political club and then ended up being a district leader and running for state senate. So the future really is at stake. Who are the next generation of leaders? We have to build that bench. Community boards are our town halls where we can invest in the future. So I'm going to take this role very seriously.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. I think our community partners are going to be very happy with those answers. So
Yes,
this is
Maria, I just want to ask, just to add on to your question with regards to community boards and diverse representation. This is my question. I mean, in Manhattan, we have Chinatown all the way downtown. We have Washington Heights, which is mostly Latino, all the way uptown. We have Harlem with a large African population, a large Francophone population. So right there, just those three major languages, whether it's Mandarin or Cantonese, Spanish or French. My question to the candidates is, what about language access? Because we speak about diverse voices. And one of the sponsors for this is the New York Coalition for Ethnic and Community Media. And I'm a member of it. And we're, the only African newspaper in New York City. And my question is, how do you engage and support ethnic, community, and local media, because they are the trusted voices and they are the ones that can engage the community in their native language, especially about joining community boards and being more civically engaged. So we'll start with the senator and then the councilman.
Yeah, well, thanks for your work in community, ethnic, and local media. It's an enormously important issue, especially with the consolidation of media and the fact that, look, the New York Times on most days doesn't even cover New York, and in my humble opinion. So we need to ensure that our local media is strong. I'm proud, Mona, that I passed through the state budget last year something called the Local Journalism Sustainability Act. You know about it, right? $90 million. Hopefully, small newspapers and publications can take advantage of that and hire more journalists. That was first in the nation. Secondly, I led the effort this session to get $4 million into national public radio and specifically WNYC. Also, a lifeline for local elections. I don't have to tell you, we live in a deliberative democracy. It's important that voters understand the candidates and the issues in order to make informed decisions. If they're watching, Fox News or MSNBC or reading their echo chamber of newspapers, whether it be the New York Post or the New York Times, they're not getting local news like they should. So that's why I think it's crucially important. And specifically about how we can build in representation of multi-language speakers into community boards. One of the things I've been trying to advocate is for more hybrid meetings of community boards so that people who are professionals or have caregiving responsibilities or they're just at work longer than the community board meetings can take advantage of that and actually vote and participate. I can envision if we ever normalize that, I can imagine language access and translation services on those hybrid meeting platforms.
Thank you. Councilman Powers?
Thank you. And you want to repeat how really essential it is to have these
Yes.
local outlets that serve our communities, serve to help tackle language barriers. And I think all of us have a sort of favorite local newspaper where we get our own local sort of version of news. And during my campaign, I've seen how important it is as we are working on things to make sure that different outlets, especially with language communities that are bilingual, that we make sure that we also are talking to those outlets that serve those communities so they know exactly what's going on and they are informed. So number one is community boards and borough president's office, of course, should be working with those local outlets, especially ones that are bilingual, to make sure that they can stay informed about local issues that are happening, when to be at meetings, when to come and register their opinion or voices on issues that are really important to them. And that's a commitment I will make very clearly. Second is making sure those meetings are accessible when it comes to language access so that people can come and feel like they can participate. If we do all the recruitment and we get all the balance that we want, and yet when they actually show up to the meeting as a member of the public or a member of the community board and feel like is inaccessible to them, then we're failing. And so we have to do a lot more about that. And look, we've seen borough president's offices in the past actually be able to serve in Brooklyn and other places as a news source themselves and help distribute news and work with local outlets. I love to replicate that, where we have a clearer sort of a place in our office for places for local outlets to be able to get news from us and to be able to also distribute news to people that want to be part of the conversation.
Oh, if I could just add something that Keith and I both share, which was a newspaper that served Peter Cooper Village, Stuyvesant Town, called Town and Village. Keith, wasn't it like the centerpiece of like...
It was everything, man. It's gone.
It was everything.
It was gone.
And it's
I know.
Gone. Rest in peace, Town and Village. But we used to, Keith and I, it was the Bible of local organizing, and it's sadly disappeared.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Excellent. So moving on, this can be short answers. It's on the casinos. We got a lot of questions this morning. People want to make sure we talk about casinos. It's been in the press. New York State Legislature has approved 3 licenses to operate downstate casinos, and several proposals have been floated for Manhattan, including Times Square, Hudson Yards, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Midtown East near the United Nations. Can you tell us your position on opening a casino in Manhattan? Councilmember Powers, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm hearing deep skepticism from a lot of my neighbors and Manhattanites about having a casino that would cause congestion, safety issues, much other things. So considering me, they deliver a lot of jobs and economic development for the city, but Manhattan may be the place where it's the hardest to do this because other places have community support. They have space to do it. So I'm listening to them, and we have a process that Albany laid out here to go through the community conversation. But I'm hearing from my community, at least on the east side, a lot of deep skepticism about putting one there. And I'm hearing, I know on the west side, folks are saying the same. So look, they could have put guardrails in against Manhattan, I think, from the first place when they passed it. We're going to go through the community advisory process, but I'm not hearing a lot of support today for them, at least in the Manhattan piece. I think in other parts of the city, we're hearing more support from their local communities and community boards.
Great. Senator Hoylman-Sigal?
Yeah, I'm opposed, and I'll be voting negative on any Manhattan casino. I draw a bright line at that one. We know that casinos prey on addiction. I saw a study recently, Maria, that over 50% of casino revenues are from individuals with certifiable problems of addiction. I mean, That is just unacceptable on its face. But let's talk about the quality of life issues that we're all struggling with: addiction, crime, mental health, traffic. All of those will be exacerbated if you plop a casino down in the middle of a neighborhood struggling with those issues. And the studies have shown that the situation becomes worse in municipalities that have a casino. So again, I'm very clear up and expressing my opposition to a Manhattan casino. And I'll say, with all due respect, we did put guardrails into our bill that passed the legislature. We have a community advisory committee, and it requires a 2/3 vote of support. And from that perspective, you're going to need the borough president and at least several other individuals to support a casino on that committee in order for it to pass. So the community advisory committee can basically negate a casino before it even gets, further in the application process. So that's what I'm banking on in Manhattan.
Great. So let's move on to education. The release of the 2024 National Assessment of Educational Progress scores highlight a persistent crisis for New York students. The data shows that New York students remain below pre-pandemic levels in fourth grade reading and eighth grade math, which are critical indicators of future academic success. It also exposes alarming achievement gaps between white and Asian students and their Black and Hispanic peers. Most concerning, more than half of Black and Hispanic students in New York scored below both basic grade levels in fourth grade reading and eighth grade math. So this is a major crisis. What would you do to support improving academic outcomes for all students, from the lowest performers to the highest performers, ELLs and special needs students, and making sure they all get the support and programs they need to achieve or exceed their academic potential? Senator Hoylman, do you want to go first?
Sure. And Marie, you and I have spoken about the challenges that our public school system has in teaching kids to read. And I have a 14-year-old and a 7-year-old, both daughters. And my 14-year-old was diagnosed with dyslexia in fourth grade. And as I've said, that's about 4 grades too late. You need to start Orton Gillingham, which is a reading program, if you will, for kids with dyslexia that's been around for the better part of 100 years. Not taught, sadly, in our public schools to the extent it should be. Credit to Mayor Adams for drilling down on that and talking about dyslexia in a very, candid way. He talks about the dyslexia to prison pipeline. No wonder 20% or more of Black men on Rikers are dyslexic, because they have very few opportunities, employment and otherwise, if you can't read. So my idea is to engage a specialist in the borough president's office who will pre-screen any family that wants their kindergartner attested for dyslexia or dysgraphia. We can do it actually rather cost efficiently. The tests cost less than $10 a pop. They can be administered on an iPad. And if they do come out positive for further evaluation, then the parent has to seek a neuropsychological exam. Here's the problem with neuropsychological exams: they cost anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000 a pop, not covered by your health insurance until I authored a bill with Assemblymember Bobby Carroll, from whom I learned a lot about dyslexia, and now private health insurance has to pay for that. So I'm very proud of that effort in dyslexia. I've worked with a leading researcher named Sally Shaywitz at the Yale Center for Creativity and Dyslexia, and want to continue that work in the public schools and, more importantly, in the borough president's office.
I know Dr. Shavich. She's an excellent advocate for dyslexic children. Anyone who's a parent of a dyslexic child reveres her. Before we go to the council member, I just want to ask part two of that question, and then, of course, give council member Powers a chance to answer both parts. One group of parents feel very left behind by current policy, and these are public school families who want more quality, rigorous curriculum, real G&T, screen schools, and believe in merit-based education, as I do as well, very strongly. Would you advocate for these families, and if so, how? And would you support, for example, opening up another screen school using the SHSAT in Manhattan, which I think people would love to hear?
I support more specialized high schools. They are the pathway to success for so many young people who may be first generation or coming from lower incomes. Look, I did not grow up in New York City, sadly. I wish I would have. But for me, my golden ticket was education. And I believe that those opportunities through specialized high schools are incredibly important, and I support them strongly. Yes, I would definitely back more of these schools. And it's also going back to that infrastructure point that I tried to make earlier about what attracts young people, families, CEOs, and new businesses. It's having an excellent public school system and opportunities like Bronx High School or Science or Stuyvesant or Hunter. That's what makes New York City great, and I would support the creation of more of those opportunities.
Great. Councilmember Powers, please feel free to take your time answering both parts of the question. I know you have a stop soon, so
I got to leave after this one, but I appreciate it. Great question, because we do have a role in the Borough President's office as supporting our school system here. That includes our funding to make sure they can meet their capital needs. That's our appointment to local CECs. That's an appointment to the local PEP, the Panel Education citywide PEP, which is so important, and a bunch of other important ways we can support our school system. And look, when I was growing up here in the city, our school system felt stronger and more vibrant and offering more opportunities. And I think a lot of parents feel like it is today. When you talk to parents, you can look at all the parent surveys, I think, which are the first place to start when you think about what are parents saying, why are they leaving a school system to go to private school, to go to charter schools, to leave the city. Of course, there's certain elements around safety and affordable housing and things about the city that we need to fix. But inside the school system, a lot of parents are tackling a need for better reading and math curriculum and overhauling that. So the kids feel like all kids feel like they're learning and, frankly, meeting their basic needs. Chronic absenteeism and other issues that I think continue to plague a lot of our schools and leave a lot of students lagging behind. School safety, by the way, I'm supported by the union representing the school safety officers here in the city. It was I think my first labor endorsement of the entire race. And they feel deeply, and I agree with them, that we need to continue to have enhanced school safety measures here, because if you don't feel safe, then how does the rest of the school day go? So to tackle that as well. And then, I'm also advocating for expanded 3K seats here in the borough. We just got a few more, about 30, 40 more in my district of 3K seats, expanded day 3K seats. So working families and pre-K seats and middle-class families have an actual path to take advantage of them, because it feels like right now so many of them are not taking advantage of really free and quality programs because it doesn't match their exact needs. And I'd like to roll out a 2K program. I propose that for Manhattan, starting in neighborhoods where we've heard from families it will make a big difference for them. So to roll out 2K seats to connect them all the way through, which I think does improve education outcomes, but obviously solves a very important equation for so many families when it comes to working and income and cost of living. So those are some of the top pieces of it. And look, my sister went to Bronx Science. All many of my friends went to the specialized high schools here. It was a cost savings for the family. It was a quality education. and it lets students who are really high quality learn together. So I do believe having those gifted programs, having this more programs for advanced learners and really good high quality students is really important. Having another specialized high school in Manhattan would be something it's definitely something I support. We just created a new high school, I should mention, in Kips Bay. That we certainly could continue to talk about. We also heard from parents about the desire to have more Manhattan admissions for high schools here in the borough. And myself and Councilman Menon and some others had worked through that to make sure that there was more schools for Manhattan parents, since Manhattan is such a central place for families to send their students from all over the city, such as high schools. So to make sure Manhattan has a place in that conversation too. And frankly, this is a simple one, but also it's not about learning, but it's about affordability. Not every student in Manhattan right now is getting an Omni card for free. I remember that paper bus pass I used to get, that half fare, full fare one in Manhattan. But we want kids get to work, get to school, get to after school activities. We should provide every kid with a free way to do that. That would enhance their experience here as well. So yes, we should be adding those types of seats and advanced learning here. We should be, I think, boosting math and reading programs here and continuing to focus on early education programs. I put out a lot of ideas on the campaign trail that would do just that.
Thank you so much. I know you have to go, but I want to ask you two quick questions before you go. Priscilla's Law, is that a yes or a no from you?
I support it from commercial bikes as a start. And I've been on that bill. And I do think we urgently need to take action on the question on e-bikes and frankly, mopeds. Just want to be honest, we're not talking about mopeds a lot. I have some bills to do that. And I would support it starting with commercial workers. And then I would be open to talking about it beyond that.
Okay. Second question. Gail Brewer and Justin Brannon have stated publicly that they support a moratorium on granting any more lucrative shelter contracts in buildings in residential neighborhoods that would be more suitable for housing, not shelters. Before you go, would you support such a moratorium?
I support housing as a first option. And I think what they're talking about, what Gail's saying basically here is let's start with housing as a conversation before we say temporary and hand out very lucrative contracts versus stabilizing people's home with a real home. So that mentality does need to shift. And I agree with the council member and both council members on that philosophy shift very quickly. I also frankly think we need to have a new oversight body over our homeless shelter system. Too many of them have poor conditions. There's too many financial questions here. Let's create a new entity to oversee them. I think that would help address some of those concerns. But a moratorium, I think that would hurt our ability to solve the homelessness crisis here in New York City. But a housing first approach, I think, would certainly be something I support. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Can I squeeze in one more question for you before you go? We have seen many mayoral candidates call for a rent freeze, but the cost of operating in New York City continues to rise through property taxes, insurance, water, sewer, and utilities, and city-mandated compliance regimes. If you are elected, what will you do to bring down the cost of operating housing in New York City, especially for us small property owners?
Yeah, great question. Look, property tax reform, critical and key to so many of these issues to help them unlock, frankly, cost. We have to continue to look at every mandate we pass here in the city and have a question about how it's going to affect the small guys. And we can even think about how the small guys, middle guys, and big guys, I live in a very large complex with a big landlord. We can, I think, differentiate between exactly how they apply those laws. For those small apartments, we have to unlock, I think, warehouse apartments that should be rentable today and are not. And I think we have to advance policies to do that. And look at every cost, whether it's the water bill, the property tax bill, the mandates the city is putting on them to unlock more to save those buildings, honestly, because I am concerned we have a crisis on our hands in the future, a lot of distressed assets for very small owners and not a lot of pathways out of it. And we should start addressing those before it becomes, the Bronx is burning 2.0 here, and we actually should start investing in those. So property tax reform, I think it looms large here, but the city could certainly look at a lot of the mandates we're putting on them and continue to, think about how that might address, how that might hurt the smallest of the smallest people here. And frankly, look, during my time in the council, I've met with the small property owners associations and many of the folks representing those folks to hear from their needs. and ways that we could try to tackle costs that would give them an opportunity to invest back into their building, maintain good quality conditions, and not default on their buildings or have complete disinvestment here.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you,
so much
guys.
for joining us tonight.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks, guys.
Be
Thank
safe.
you.
Senator Hoylman-Sigal, let's start with Priscilla's Law. I think, where do you stand on Priscilla's Law?
Well, I signed on to the Albany version of it, and I would support it generally. Of course, I've been trying to get e-bikes, commercial e-bikes licensed in Albany. I think, there's a lot of people complaining about the criminal summonses that have been issued by NYPD, but I think what the commissioner has pointed out is like, we need these bikes to be licensed so that we can have proper enforcement. And I think she's right to that extent. So I want to see commercial e-bikes licensed, but I want to go even further. I want to make sure that commercial e-bikes carry insurance, because God forbid you're hit by one of these bikes, as I know several people who have, they're out of luck when it comes to insurance. That should be a requirement, and it should be on the app delivery companies themselves. And then third, I want to make sure that we end the unfair and punitive algorithms, the time clock that makes those delivery drivers have to ride like a bat out of hell to get your pizza to you so it's piping hot. That's crazy. We got to stop that. And we should ban those. So those are my three ideas. In addition to that, I'll let you know that Assemblymember Boris and I passed a bill last session that goes to the point that the council member made. Gasoline powered mopeds need to be registered at the point of sale according to our new law. You can't buy a gasoline powered moped, take it out of the retail establishment without registering it first with the Department of Motor Vehicles and having that license plate affixed to that vehicle. And I'm proud to say that that's now in effect.
That's great. Before we go back to housing, I just wanted to talk to Councilmember Powers about Priscilla's Law before he jumped off. But since we're on the topic of these e-bikes, what's your position on e-bikes in Central Park?
Opposed.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's go back to housing. So as I said before, Gail Brewer and Justin Brannan have stated publicly that they're supporting a moratorium on new shelter contracts in buildings in residential neighborhoods that are more suitable for housing. There are some slated for Manhattan. I'm a 45-year resident of Manhattan. It's been spiraling, downward in terms of the lack of new housing being built and problems for people in communities who, their kids can't afford to live here, yet we're repurposing a lot of buildings for shelter housing on these extremely lucrative contracts where the building owner is making many multiples of the building's value, and they're out of the rent regulation system when they do that. And the shelter providers are also making, 40, 50, $60 million over a short period of time. And this is all housing that could really be useful for teachers, first responders, people who really need this lower cost housing. So I know that Gail Brewer and Justin Brannan are supporting this moratorium in Manhattan, and I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on it.
Well, just let me, on the e-bikes, I just want to, on the Central Park question, I want to be clear about city bikes and pedal assist. I'm okay with those being in Central Park. I just want to make that clear. For commercial e-bikes, absolutely not. Yeah. But in terms of the moratorium, I would agree with the council member. Look, we're in a housing emergency, and that includes supportive housing. But shelters need to go, the way of a lot of things we've moved past. Congregate shelters in particular aren't just places where if you're unhoused, you don't want to be there because they're unsafe and insecure. So we need to move to that housing first model. I do support the construction of supportive housing, particularly for people who are struggling with mental illness and addiction. The clubhouse model in my district at a location called Fountain House has been wildly successful. Um, it kind of operates around the same kind of contours as Alcoholics Anonymous. When people struggling with mental health can meet as a group and support each other through their recovery. Housing is important also for medication and other services. So I would not want to lock anyone out of any part of Manhattan. I don't think that's who we are as Manhattanites. That said, Maria, I think part of the problem around new shelters or supportive housing uh, and the like has been around the lack of notice to community boards and other stakeholders. No neighbor wants to move into an apartment and then realize, months later that there's a you know, a new institution that's coming to their neighborhood and the community board wasn't informed. Nobody got to weigh in and the issue hasn't been fully discussed. In my neighborhood, there was a shelter that went up, I think it was on 12th Street. The community board got notice, they voted for it. And I think that kind of like respect to the community is very important. And sadly, it has been missing too many times when the city proposes a shelter or a supportive housing in a specific neighborhood. But I want to lean on compassion, but notice is important.
Okay, I think that some may disagree that the community was in favor of that particular shelter, and I think that's a very good. Yeah, I think so, and I think that's a very good example of.
Yeah, there is a lawsuit.
The frustration people have with community boards generally. I think that kind of the same part of it's really part two of the people don't feel heard or they feel like they're a special interest on the community board. So I hear you.
Well, we need to fix that. We definitely need to fix that because I think you're right. The credibility of the board, its ability to represent the neighborhood, is key to projects like that moving forward in a successful way. I agree with you.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so let's go back to the rent freeze issue. I'll just read it quickly again. So mayoral candidates are calling for a rent freeze, but the cost of operating buildings continues to rise. Property taxes, insurance, water, sewer, utilities, and city mandated complex regimes. So two questions here. If you're elected, what can you do to bring down the cost of operating this housing in New York City for our small property owners? And second, and this was a suggestion from one of our community partners, would you consider having a position in your new administration that could be a liaison for the small property owners community?
Yes. Let's take the second part of that question first. I speak a lot to small landlords, and I should mention that there's one named Rocio Sands who, she's educated me a lot on this issue. Small landlords are small business people, and to have a small business navigator in the borough president's office to help them, I think would be a tremendous asset to the community. The first part of your question, in terms of taxes, again, I'm mindful of the fact that small businesses are struggling, including small landlords. There's one tax that I want to champion to get rid of, the commercial rents tax, which is 6% on the base rent, only applied, Maria and Mona, 96th Street and below. Completely punitive to Manhattan, and no other borough, no other small business in any other borough has this tax. So we need to get rid of that because it continues to hurt the success of a lot of our businesses.
That's great. I don't need to read the next question. You just answered it. That was actually
excellent.
one of my questions. So you read our minds on that.
Wonderful.
Since you brought up small businesses, I see we had a small business question that we didn't have a chance to ask earlier. We have a member of One City Rising who is opening a small business soon. She's investing her life savings in opening up a restaurant. And I was speaking with her earlier, and she's really concerned about this red tape, high taxes, the poor quality of life that's impacting small businesses, and other obstacles. And we also have, many vacant storefronts throughout the borough, although I have noticed that seems to be improving. But these vacant storefronts really, impact the vitality of neighborhoods and the feeling that the city is just not doing well. So as borough president, what would you do to support the small business community and attract more investment to the city and this important segment of our economy?
Well, get rid of the commercial rent tax, have a small business navigator, address the chronic problem of scaffolding, which has a huge impact on a small business's ability to operate. You know what I'd like to do with this small business navigator? I'd like to have a seminar for small businesses that want to go up on social media. I don't know about you, Maria and Mona, but when you see the long lines for a new small business, it's not because they, heard about it through a friend. It's probably because a young person saw it on TikTok and sends legions of people from all over New York City and tourists from all over the world to visit this small business. Small businesses can really thrive if they're on social media, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or what have you. So I'd really like to assist our small business community in that regard. And something else the borough president's office can do through a navigator is help them, with bridge loans and other, outdoor dining applications and SLA approvals. That's something that I think the borough president, representing the entire borough, the only office that has that 360 view of the borough, can help with our small businesses, and not just the businesses in Midtown or the Village or the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side, but in communities like Chinatown, which still hasn't recovered from COVID, or Harlem, which is equally struggling on the small business front. But getting tourists there would be a huge added um, revenue stream. And we can do that through social media. And I'd like to help small businesses accomplish that.
That sounds great. So before we move off of housing, one other question that came up from our group is people really want to hear your philosophy on housing shortages and reconciling important preservation issues. So, people want to live in New York City because we have such beautiful architecture, and our preservation groups have done a magnificent job of preserving our beautiful, iconic cityscape. I noticed that in the Manhattan Voter Guide, every single candidate has listed housing shortages as their number one issue of concern. Of course, I'm not seeing anybody really talk about the corollary issue of building the economy and growing people's median income to make the city more affordable. But the issue that people really want to get to is, as borough president, how are you going to reconcile these important competing interests between preservation and people demanding that we build more housing?
It's a great question. We have West Park, Church, here on the Upper West Side, and we've had confrontations between preservation and building, throughout really New York's history. But I consider myself a preservationist. I got my start in local politics when I joined that community board that I mentioned earlier, trying to save the Edgar Allan Poe House at NYU. I remember organizing a rally, the first time I ever did that, with Congressman Nadler at the time. And, placemaking, historic placemaking is so key. I represent the Stonewall Inn, the birthplace of the contemporary LGBTQ human rights movement. For young LGBTQ people and other Americans to actually see that space and experience its facade and think about what it meant to our history, as Americans, as New Yorkers, is just crucial. So whenever I see a historic building demolished, it really pains me. And we're not just talking about exteriors, we're talking about interiors. I fought to save the only interior that was remaining designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. It was on Park Avenue. It was a car showroom. And steps have been taken to landmark that interior. You know what the developer did? They went in the middle of the night before the papers were finalized and ripped it out completely. And that's just heartbreaking to me that, you know, one of the nation's greatest architects, one of his few examples surviving in New York City, was stolen from New Yorkers in the middle of night. Um, we can balance housing and preservation. I don't think it's an either or proposition. Look at the Hearst building with that historic podium and that tower above it. You know, we can cantilever over historic buildings if we have to, but we shouldn't throw away our history. But it's a big but. We have to build more, and the space in Manhattan is short. That's why both the councilman and I support developing commercial, particularly in Midtown, for additional residential.
Great. Okay, turning it over to Mona to bring us home.
Okay.
I think we have one more section.
Yes. So I want to talk about the fentanyl crisis, Senator. So drug addiction and the fentanyl crisis is a huge problem in New York City. Many advocates believe that injection sites should be used to prevent accidental overdose deaths. However, critics of the sites argue that they enable drug use and do more to hurt and disrupt neighborhoods. There are two legalized injection sites in Manhattan, one in East Harlem and the other in Washington Heights. What is your position on injection sites? Do you support closing these facilities down or expanding them?
Well, I certainly support, you know, reviewing them, which hasn't happened. And I hear from my colleagues who represent both of those neighborhoods and about the, you know, the difficulties they face with safe injection sites. Mind you, understand that those safe injection sites were never passed by the city council or the New York State legislature. They were imposed by executive order. But I know that they're, you know, safe injection sites save lives. That has to be said. We cannot devalue a human life. But here's the question, Mona. Is it a coincidence that those are both in lower income neighborhoods? I don't think so. So if you're, you know, if somebody's going to pass a safe injection site law, you need fair share. And boy, do I hear it from my constituents in and around Penn Station that, you know, that'd be the last place that they'd want to put a safe injection site. So we need to fully understand the difficulties that safe injection sites have brought to neighborhoods, understanding that they serve a, you know, a life-saving function. So I would like to see a full review of those sites and work with my colleagues, including Senator Cordell Clear, who's endorsed me and represents one of those sites, and get to the bottom of, you know, could we move this into a hospital where it might be more appropriate? That would be my first thought about safe injection sites.
Okay. And also somewhat on the same topic, should there be a limit on the number of legal cannabis shops allowed per neighborhood, like the limit imposed on tobacco shops?
Well, I think that the Tobacco Control Board needs to keep that in mind, needs to work with local community boards and other stakeholders, both on the number and where they authorize cannabis shops. For the most part, I think since we've gotten a handle on the illegal ones, thanks to Gail Brewer and others, thank you for everyone who has helped us snuff out the illegal uh, weed shops. We need to be very cognizant of where they're placed. Are they near schools? Are they near community centers? But for the most part, I would suggest that many of them are pretty darn innocuous. There's one in my neighborhood called the Travel Agency. I literally went in there thinking it was a travel agency. Turns out it's a beautiful shop, professionally run, and frankly, a lot of good product. I'm not going to deny it, especially now that the Surgeon General has said that, just even a moderate amount of alcohol can increase your risks of cancer. Um, Perhaps cannabis is a healthier option for people who want to avoid those risks. But the borough president, again, his or her role working with the community board members and the state, and other stakeholders, and ensuring where those are placed is going to be really important.
Thank you. So I want to pivot to homelessness and mental health policies. So it's 5 years after COVID, and the city is still a mess. We have outreach providers that have been hired. We have tremendous amounts of money diverted to social services providers to clean up neighborhoods. But these initiatives are not working. Street homelessness, drug arrests, open air hard drugs, recidivism, and all are higher. And only 37% of New Yorkers feel safe, according to the most recent polls. So my question to you, Senator, is, you know, how do you plan? Could you describe your plans on addressing this crisis? And do you support expanding the use of involuntary inpatient mental health treatment when treatment is essential to a person's ability to provide for their personal safety, medical reasons, and the safety of others?
Yeah. Well, I'll preface my remarks with the fact that, most people struggling with mental illness are more likely to be the victim of a crime than to victimize someone else. That said, look, I'll never forget, I went to the funeral of Michelle Go, who I guess it was about 5 years ago, was pushed to the subway tracks near Times Square on her way home from work, visiting with her parents who had come from San Francisco. I remember very distinctly what her dad said to me. He said, "I'm not angry or bitter or even blaming the perpetrator, but they need help. Senator, get them the help they need." And Mona, I know not one, but two people who were pushed to subway tracks over the last 6 months, probably by someone who was struggling with mental illness. Um, so I'm very proud to have authored a bill that was included in the budget to increase the number of mental health professionals who can make that important decision to direct a person into treatment. And as you probably know, we expanded our definition of what it means for somebody to be of danger to themselves, and that is our new paradigm. That's the front end of the problem. The um, the back end is making sure we have the hospital beds to take care of people struggling with mental health, and we've closed 1,000 plus over the last decade. We've put more money, over $1 billion, into those new beds, but we have to get those built quickly. As I mentioned earlier, I strongly support the creation of new supportive housing. Um, One is being built in my district at the old women's correctional facility called Bayview, which was disused after Superstorm Sandy. And that's going to go a long way to providing women with opportunities. It's going to also have a clubhouse model, I hope, similar to Fountain House, as I mentioned earlier, that very successful um, outpatient um, clinical group setting that has worked so effectively for visitors to Fountain House. So I would look to create more fountain houses in different parts of the borough that have worked so well, including supportive housing.
Okay, well, thank you, Senator. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to give some closing remarks and then pass it back to Maria.
Before
Well,
you,
thank
before
you.
you, before you give the
Yeah,
closing remarks, may I just ask one quick follow-up question
yeah.
about mental illness? The current borough president, Mark Levine, has proposed adding hospital beds to a facility on Randall's Island, I believe. He said there's a hospital there with 400 beds that can be added. Would you support that work that he's
Yeah, and I think the mayor has suggested something to that. Yes, I would. I think we need more, we need more clinical beds, and we certainly need, longer treatment stays. Here's something that I've only recently discovered, having spoken to a former community board chair whose son deals with paranoid schizophrenia. When they took their son for treatment, um, the son was in treatment in a clinical bed for 2 weeks, and then the insurance said that he had to leave, and they weren't paying for a penny more. And luckily for this family, they had the resources to keep their son, or they scrambled to get the resources to keep the son in treatment. But you're not going to leave a treatment facility after 2 weeks and be on the pathway to recovery. So I want to see private insurance have to pay for longer stays, and we need discharge plans that comport with reality. I was told by this parent and community board member that that's what this is so heartbreaking. That's when parents end up abandoning their adult children, is when the insurance runs out. What are they supposed to do? Um, the their young adult is free to walk out without any medication or support, and insurance won't pay a dime further. So we have to change that.
Totally agree. I mean, Stephen Ide of the Manhattan Institute is a leading proponent of expanding federal aid for mental health coverage, and it's just an issue that I think people on both sides of the argument can agree that we're not doing enough. So thank you for that, and thank you so much for coming tonight. But please give your closing statements. We have a lot of people watching tonight, and I know they're very happy to hear you and Councilmember Powers. It's hard to get these forums organized, and it's really important for the voters to really hear where you stand.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Maria. Thank you, Mona. Thank you for putting this together. Look, I think you know that I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm not going to deny it. The Post might call me lefty, but I think I stand squarely with you when it comes to public safety and ensuring that our community feels safe on the subways. A friend of mine recently wrote an article called "It's the Subways, Stupid," kind of like when Clinton was running for president, they said it was the economy, stupid. Um, it's the subways because it is the lifeline for our economy. It's the way 90% of us get around on a daily basis. And if you don't feel confident or getting on a subway, or even more importantly, putting your child on a subway, as I do every morning, you're going to give up on New York City. And I'm proud that we have been uh, pushing the MTA for more cameras, working with the governor to get more cops on the platform. But we can't take them out of our precincts. We need officers on the platform that are specialized. We need clinicians to support those officers who are asked to do some of the, most burdensome tasks in our society. And I'll never forget a few months ago when my daughter and I were at the Westport subway station, and I saw uh, a man menacing passengers as he was on the steps to the D train. And I took a photo of him. I sent it to NYPD, and I said, "This guy needs help, and I'm afraid that he's in danger hurting himself or someone else." The following Tuesday, I was watching New York One, and I saw the perp walk of the individual who murdered three people from Chelsea to the East River, and it was that man who was 50 feet away from my daughter and me. So that is the kind of chilling um anecdote that my family and I have about the need to improve subway safety. uh, Cameras, more cops, capital improvements, and a focus on getting people who are struggling on those platforms into treatment with our new mental health law.
That's great. I really would love to just ask a couple more questions that came in from the chats, if that's okay with you.
Yes, I'm going to have to go. I can take one or two, but I have
One
to
or
jump
two.
to. I
Very
have to
good.
run out to Community Board 7, which I'm sure you can
Yes.
appreciate.
Okay, one that several people brought up are the Manhattan Borough-based jails and your position
Yeah.
on that, especially the one in Chinatown. People are really upset with that. So that's one question that
Yeah, I'll take that one
several
right
people in
away.
the chat,
What a
yeah,
disastrous plan for the neighborhood.
yeah,
The
right.
world's tallest jail. I was at a rally opposing it yesterday. The community has come up with an alternative site,
Oh,
a
great.
federal facility. Um, I want to work with our federal elected officials and the council member as borough president to repurpose that location and build affordable housing, which is what we're all talking about during this campaign.
Yep. Okay, great. Congestion pricing. Several people in the chat raised that. I know that's very controversial.
Well, it's not controversial for me. I'm a staunch supporter. Again, this may be something that I disagree with some of your viewers, but look, we need these capital dollars for access. I think it's a human right to have access to to our subway system. It's certainly a New Yorker's right, and we have less than half of our subway stations accessible. Congestion pricing is going to help further that. We've already got in my Senate district some elevator projects on the books that will be hopefully um, built in the next few years. We need to expand that across the borough. And I think we've seen a lot of benefits from congestion pricing, whether it be less traffic and I hope safer streets. But we should be looking at the data and adjust congestion pricing accordingly. I've always supported a residential exemption, just like London had. I don't know why we didn't get it, but I'll continue to advocate for it.
That's great. They really need that. Two more quick points. Several people said thank you for wearing the yellow "Free the Hostages" pin. So I just wanted to call that out.
It's an LGBTQ
Oh,
specialized.
beautiful.
Happy
Specialized.
Pride.
Beautiful.
Happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride to you as well. And one last point is several people said they would really like to advocate for no more litmus tests on future appointments to Manhattan community boards. Things like, do you own a motor vehicle? Things like that. But I think you've answered that pretty adequately. But if you want to say a word or two on that before we close.
Yeah, I think the litmus test is really, are you qualified? Do you represent the community? And do you want to do right by it?
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for going over with us tonight. Really appreciate it. And wish you best of luck in the election. And we'll be out and about. Okay.
Okay. See
Thanks
everyone
so
soon. Okay. At a subway near you, hopefully soon.
Yes. And thank you everyone for listening in tonight. And Mona and our timekeeper. Thank you.